Okay, look, there's an awful lot you're getting to have to re-understand in this book. Okay? And a lot of it's bad translations, a lot of it's being well-churched, a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff. But hopefully we're now starting to understand this idea of a better covenant. All right? I watched a guy on YouTube. Man, I wish I could remember his name. I can't think of his name, but he's like somewhere from like a South Pacific island or something. He dresses like he's a rock star, wears like leather jackets and stuff or whatever. But he was all saying and attacking the law. It says you're wrong to do the law. Who's that? Yes, Joe, what's his name? Joseph Prince. He actually made it sound like, no, he actually came right out and told you were in sin if you tried to keep the law. And he quoted out of Hebrews, says, because it's better. It's a better covenant because the other one was bad. No, this one's better because the other one was not as fully developed. This one's better because you had to master the other one before you could even get to this one. This one's better, the other one's not bad. It's just better. But there are guys out there actively telling you that your attempts to keep Torah is sin. So say you've fallen from grace. Of course, if grace is merited favor, you've fallen from grace if you don't keep Torah. I got it backwards. Perhaps we'll end up in Galatians one of these days and we'll do the same thing to Galatians we just did to Hebrews. Okay? So, and again, I shouldn't say, well, we'll do the same. Hopefully he'll allow me the opportunity to open my mind to that stuff as I'm going through. Everything I taught you about Hebrews in the last 4 or 5 weeks, most of that stuff is stuff he showed me this last few weeks. Okay? Which is why generally I didn't do a lot of using the book of Hebrews because he hadn't really given me the green light to go and really rip it apart and open it up and have me see, what I needed to see. So we're all learning it together. Okay? And so hopefully we're now starting to see that whole thing, same thing with him appointing a time or an age for the Son to accomplish and complete at the end of chapter 7. Some really cool stuff. All right. And I'm not being prideful to say that. I'm not impressed with me. I'm impressed with the stuff he's allowing me to say and giving me to say because I'm enjoying it and I'm as impressed as you are with it, not because it's me, but because it's him. Okay? So I like to go back and listen because he has me saying stuff sometimes that are not even in my notes. And I go, that is really cool stuff. It's him, not me. I'm impressed with him. Okay? The only thing, if anything you want to be impressed with me is my willingness to get out of the way and let him do it. Okay, that part I'll take because I'm very willing to let him say whatever he needs to say when I'm up at the mic. No filter. I just get out of the way. All right, so this is the afterburn time. So if you're wanting to make a comment or have a question, if you're on live stream, please be respectful of the fact that this is not an open forum for everybody to push their arguments, agendas, or websites or ministries or any of that stuff, but this is MTOI's and Beth Shalom's, Sabbath service. And allow leadership to answer questions. They may want to direct people towards a teaching to answer a question. Allow that. This is not a place for those kind of arguments. We had a problem with that on Tuesday where after everything was being said, somebody said, yeah, but he's wrong already because he's calling himself rabbi or something like that. It's like, well, listen to the teaching called Call No Man Rabbi. It might explain that whole problem, okay? So I know people have these very emotional knee-jerk reactions to things. But that's only because they haven't had the patience to go and really search out the matter, okay? Now, who wants to get us started here locally? Okay, Kirk. And then we have Steve walking around the mic, and then Rob will take your comments and questions on the live stream.
I just had a comment that it reminds me when you were talking about a stronger covenant as it being a part of the translation. Or every time we read the Torah and finish a book, it's what's the blessing that we say after that?
Chazak, v'nitz chazek.
Yeah, and right. I was looking into that. It means be stronger, get stronger in it, and
be strengthened.
It fits perfect. Yeah, be strengthened.
Amen.
That's right.
Be strong, and may we be strengthened by what we just read. Exactly. But then we have to get to a certain level then to get to this better or stronger or more fully developed or requiring a higher level of mastery. Okay, who's next? Okay, Deirdre.
First of all, let me just express how happy I am to be able to sit through a sermon.
Oh, yeah, your daughter's not sitting there.
No, she's at home with the sniffles.
Yeah.
So I have 2 comments and a 2-part question. I'll try not to be long-winded. I'm going to start with the question first. You may have answered this already, but I haven't been able to listen fully yet. Every single Are You Covenanted sermons. Would Samuel be considered a member of the Melchizedekian priesthood, since he was under Eli's tutelage and was raised in the temple? And for that matter, would prophets in general be a member?
Yeah, prophets in general
Okay.
would be considered part of the Melchizedekian.
Okay.
Okay? Because remember, they're doing the primary thing, which is speaking the word of Yahweh with authority. They're the disciplers. They're the ones who, and look, they have a higher authority than the king even. You know, Saul ran into trouble not listening to Samuel. Okay? So when he said, who told you to go and do this before I got here? Why didn't you wait for me to show up to do the offering? You know, because I'm higher than you. I know you think you are because you're king, okay, but I'm the high priest, okay, so to speak, okay? So prophets fall into, most likely they fall into the Melchizedekian, okay?
Okay. So that's the question. The first comment I have is about chapter 7, verse 22, and you're talking about how, you know, the Adamic and Noahic and all the covenants, they're just kind of expanding upon each other, and they just go up and up and up. And the imagery that was brought to my mind was the imagery of coral. And it's basically, coral is alive, and it's a little creature, and they just expand on the skeletons of the ones that have gone before. And the more the coral expands, the healthier the reef system is. You know, the fish come and they dwell, you know, in and among the coral. They find food and shelter. So, I don't know, that kind of clicked in my head when we were mentioning the covenants. You know, in order to flourish, you need to keep expanding.
Amen. Excellent. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but I probably should have, is like, you know, when we say it's more fully developed, what did Yeshua start his ministry with? I'm going to take a Torah command and I'm going to more fully develop it. I'm going to tell you about adultery and I'm going to more fully develop it. I'm going to talk about murder and I'm going to more fully develop it. Okay? And so he said that's, if you could master the literalness of not committing adultery, now you need to master the part about not desiring to do it. You can master the actual, you didn't kill the person, but now you got to master your anger. Okay? And so you have those things. It's a more fully developed understanding, or the fullness of the intent. Okay? And the fullness of the intent of the temple and priesthood system is Yeshua as high priest in the heavenly temple. Okay? What else?
Just one last comment, you know, talking about going at, you know, your own pace in terms of, you know, trying to get everything settled, you know, learn the basics and then keep going on and on and on. I was terrible at school, so I really, or at least for math, so I got the school connection. But I thought to myself, you know, thank you, Yahweh, that we didn't all just get pulled into this together, and we had to learn and just make the grade, you know, right away. You know, we were able to go at our own paces, and I think he knew that we would need that because some of us are faster learners, some of us are slower learners, some of us are just stubborn, so we have to get that beaten out of us.
Amen. Amen. Look, it's the way it is with anything. Look, and that's why you have your teachers like me that, you know, spend, you know, hours and hours all the time in the Word, and so we have available to us at least a mastery of knowing what's in there to be available to putting the puzzle together, okay? And so the same thing with any, you know, if you're a musician, if you're an athlete, whatever you are, the amount of time you put into your craft and mastering the basics, and anybody that's studied anything, whatever kind of thing that's an art of any sort, every art has the same rule: master the basics. Whether you're a musician, it's always the scales and the basics. If you're an athlete, it's the basic elements of whatever sport you're doing. Whatever it is, if you're an artist and you're painting, there are basics. Anything, it's always about mastering and focusing on and never departing from the basics, okay? That's your core that you build on. If there's weakness in your basics, there's going to be weakness in everything else. And so to say that you're building the new covenant on nothing, by saying the old covenant was bad and done away with, now what are you building it on? You've got nothing. It's sitting there on air. Okay? Okay, who's next?
One thing about learning what we're learning in the covenants One of the
Yeah,
things.
go ahead. Stand up for everybody. so
I'm
we can
sorry.
Get you on the camera. There you go.
Okay. About learning these covenants, and like what we just learned today, I ask myself often, what do I want? Do I want God's good, or do I want His best? And that helps, because the thing is like in sports, it's muscle memory. You kind of referred to that several times because it's an automatic. You don't think it's just there. And so when we start learning this, the progression is the desire to want to get His best, which encourages us internally to keep wanting to study and be around teachers that have knowledge. Like in sports, we always want to try to play over our head. That's how we learn more.
Right. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to use that for another example. I remember taking a class in college on, I forget what it was called, but it was a sports instruction class. So we had to learn how to teach people how to do sports, okay? And I'll tell you what, it was really tough for most of the students to come up the first time, because after you learn the problem, you were able to do it better the second time. But the first time, the teacher had somebody stand up, tossed to them a baseball, and said, tell me how to throw one of those. The thing is, if you've been doing it your whole life, you don't think about actually telling somebody how to hold it even. Do you hold it with your palm? Do you hold it with your fingertips? How many fingers do you use? You don't think about the details because you do them automatically. It's muscle memory. And you know, how you position it. Do you bring it out here? Do you bring it over here? Is it by your ear? Is it out wide? I mean, how do you even position your body? Do you stand straight? Do you turn your body? But because and so people left a lot of steps out the first time. Now, after they saw what happened and realized that, then all the rest of them, we realized we have to explain to a brand new person all of the steps, okay? So the Torah, the Scripture, is giving you all the steps that eventually you won't have to think about all of them. But there's a lot of steps, and it becomes like muscle memory, and it becomes something that you develop in that way. And so, yeah, He's going to give us a lot of detail, and there's going to be a lot of stuff. But you know what? We have been you know what? Also, I'll tell you what else. If you're a coach, if somebody's been doing something wrong for a long time, correcting that is really hard because of the muscle memory. We got the same thing. Our brain is a big, thick muscle, okay? And our heart is too. And that becomes a problem where unlearning and retraining can be really tough because the habits are developed. And so, you know, if that person's been playing an instrument wrong or holding a ball wrong or doing whatever it is in their endeavor, getting them to stop doing it that way is really, really tough. Okay, go ahead.
I just thought of something else while you were talking about coaching, and I've coached, but I think of the scripture in Proverbs where it says you draw it out of them. And because of your heart's desire and your love for the Word and the Lord, you're drawing us to want to have that same kind of desire.
Yeah,
and
man.
that's what Proverbs says, and I see you doing that.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, who's next? Okay, and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. You're going to have to put it right up by your mouth.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So I had actually thought of what Yeshua had said with the adultery, and when you were teaching that, and it makes me think, is the book of Hebrews more like an expounding on that and a setting up of just making sure we have a foothold of, you know, where we are and the level we're supposed to be on? It seems like that's what he's really going through the whole book.
Well, it is to some degree, but I mean, he's really on remember, everything in Scripture, at least if the Jews are correct, is written on at least 4 levels. So the very simple level is he's trying to help them understand what is going to happen when the temple goes away. But there are other levels like what you're talking about that can help us understand about, are you ready for this next level of growth, of covenant, of responsibility, of relationship with Him, not just dealing with the mechanics of the changes. Okay, so yes, absolutely that stuff is in there. Okay, who's next? All right, Steve.
I was just wondering, sometimes when it comes to going to that next level, is it a possibility that some of the challenges we experience or a precursor to being able to understand the next level? Because what if there's something there that's kept you where you are, unable to move or forward or deeper in because you're still struggling with what's been behind you?
Yeah, that's certainly part of it, absolutely. And look, and part of this is why I've said over and over again, you need a teacher. You need someone to help you to see what you don't see and help push through. And also someone you can trust until you see it. That may be too simplistic, but just let me say that again. You still need someone you can trust even if you don't see it, until you see it, because it may take a while. Okay, because if you don't see it, your tendency will be, well, if I don't see it, then the teacher must be wrong. Or if I don't see it, I must be right. That's not necessarily true. Doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong either, but I'm saying, but it's not necessarily true. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean the teacher's wrong. But that's why you have to vet out and find yourself a teacher, okay? And so that's part of why Paul tells you need these people. Okay, Tricia?
Thank you. This really brings just a lot of the puzzle together. And when you're talking about the sensei and the mastery and the foundation, the keys that come to my mind with the Torah study that we had Tuesday was Deuteronomy 17. And a lot of the trust that we have, quote unquote, because you use the word sensei, and I understanding the powers and just the obedience, Deuteronomy 17 and the obedience of submission being a foundational key so that our minds can trust. And having that gives us a mastery key to be able to ground that soil. As you were discussing last week, in last week's discussion about is our soil prepared?
Amen.
And so, I just wanted to bring, tie those pieces together because the obedience of submission to when we do come to you for counsel, and whether we agree or disagree, submission is when we don't agree and we obey, and that allows us to be torn, to be able to get to that next level.
Amen. Amen. Look, let's even use the military example of boot camp. Okay, boot camp is meant to break you down so that you can receive. Okay? And that's kind of like Deuteronomy 8:2. He's going to lead you through your wilderness to break you down, to humble you so that you can receive. But you got to get broken first because you're sort of that wild stallion, self-sovereign, not wanting to be bridled and, and that's hard. And so he's going to let you go through a process. Eventually it's going to break that stuff down. And once you become broken, he can lift you up. That's James chapter 5 or 4 or 5, where it talks about, when you can humble yourself before the master, then he can lift you up. Okay? And so, so now I want to make sure I'm giving you the right verse. 4:10, okay? Where you can humble yourself, James 4:10. You humble yourself before the master so he can lift you up. But you got to get broken first. And you're going to lament and mourn and weep and all that stuff because he's breaking you. Nobody enjoys the breaking. Okay? Some of you have children. You know what they tried to do with them, and you know what your parents tried to do with you. And you know what? Most of us are only an incomplete process. Your parents didn't succeed with you, and you don't succeed fully with your children. He has to do the rest. Okay? There's a breaking that has to happen. All right? Not that we want to be broken and damaged, but he has to break that will of that self-sovereignty. He's got to break that bad piece of it. Okay? Yeah. Okay, this is part of his process to heal you and to get you in the right place. Okay, Shira?
Thank you so much. Oh, this is really exciting. But my mind is just swimming with questions from the historical perspective. When we use the analogy of the martial arts and the different belts or building into a new level, it could be mistakenly assumed that, okay, these people believed in Yeshua, so somehow they had reached a higher level of the Spirit than the people back in before Yeshua's time, which you've often said to us, that's not true. They had the Spirit in Yeshua's time. So the author of Hebrews is just finished telling them, you still need milk. You're not even ready for the meat.
Right.
So this whole new revelation or this exposition that we're having in Hebrews, I'm just saying, okay, could this have been if people were more responsive, if they were more accepting, because then this could have happened sooner. It's sort of like, when the 70 elders sat on the sapphire pavement. He could have had the kingdom come right then, and we also look at what you shared with us about, okay, Yeshua's delaying his coming because we're not ready. And so here these people are, they're clearly not ready, but Yeshua told them, because you rejected me, Jerusalem's going to be, destroyed.
Right.
And all this is going to be restored. So I'm just wondering, how do we put this in the historical context, how this terrible, terrible thing that Yahweh is using to bring them a revelation of the better. Can you?
Okay, so, all right, so that's a really good point, because I know that we can have this prideful sort of Christian thing pop in, and I want to make sure we don't have that happen, which is, this is only being done with this group of people because of necessity, not because they earned it. And no different than when they came out in Deuteronomy and he said, look, your exodus out of Egypt and you're getting to go into land is because you guys are special. It was part of a bigger plan. Okay? Well, in this case, he's explaining to these people, not because they had mastered a level, but they needed to know that to understand what he's going to do, they're going to have to learn to master a certain thought process, because this reality is the new reality. That doesn't make the people any more special, but it happens to be that these people happen to live at a time when this new reality was coming in. Okay? The new reality of a temple going away and this other priesthood now being something they need to understand better to function in, okay? They didn't need to know that much about the Melchizedekian while the Levitical was in function. So this is not elevating the people in any way. As a matter of fact, like you said, the writer of Hebrews picks on them pretty good, okay? They're still choking on milk. But the thing is that by necessity, this group of people, because it was happening in their lifetime and it affects all of us after that moment, we need to understand something that the people beforehand just didn't need. Not that they weren't qualified for, or they didn't, somehow they're negatively impacted because they didn't have it. They didn't need it, okay? This is now a new necessity situation. By necessity, they needed to understand something, which then we all get to understand because it's still affecting us. There's still no temple, still no priesthood. We're still dealing with Yeshua as high priest and the heavenly. All those things are still happening. So it's a great point, though, because the Christian mindset often says, in a dispensational way, we're special because we are here now and we got this special information or special this. It's kind of a Gnostic thing as well. And so, no. There's no expectation that the people are special. They're just needing to deal with this new reality. He says, you are now being forced to deal with a new understanding of reality. The reality of your life, which was based on a temple system and a priesthood, etc., has now gone bye-bye. It's going away. So you now have to adjust to that, all right? It'd be like a person who, nothing special, obviously, if you became paralyzed. You now have to adjust to a new reality of not being able to function the way you did. Maybe now you have to be in a wheelchair, or maybe you lose the use of your hands or something. Whatever it is, and now you have to adjust to a new reality. Okay? So it had nothing to do with the people in their walk, in their growth. It was just that at that time, they were experiencing this new reality. Okay? And so this is important. So that's a good point. Historically, you remember, he knows the end from the beginning. He's allowing and causing things to happen, knowing full well how the timeline's going to go. He knew we'd still be sitting here in 2019, and Yeshua was still not here, okay? That's not an issue. But he also knew that at this time, knowing the way things were going on in the Middle East area, that with the way the Roman Empire was and the way the tensions were and everything else, that was a good timing for the next step there, okay? Good point. Okay, who's next? Okay, Michael?
Yeah, I was wondering if...
Hey, Michael, how's it feel to be on this side of the camera?
Oh, wow, it's great. I was wondering in the Millennium if the Levitical priesthood is going to come back into
Yes. The answer is yes. It says so in Ezekiel, and the Levitical priesthood will function again.
Okay.
Because
so
it's part of the mastery process that we're still not getting.
So, if I'm understanding correct, Yeshua is of a different priesthood, but yet he's going to be our.
Well, he'll be the king at that point.
Okay, so he won't be.
He's still going to be high priest of Melchizedekian priesthood forever, but we're going to be dealing with the Levitical priesthood for a period of time.
Okay.
Okay? But he's going to be functioning mostly wearing the king hat. Okay? Does that make any sense to everybody? Okay? Because he's a high priest forever of the Melchizedekian. There's been Melchizedekian priests all the way through the Levitical priesthood reign. They have different functions. Generally, the Melchizedekians are the teachers, the instructors, the prophets who are bringing the word with authority. They're not doing the things of the temple service, okay, and judgment. Remember, they don't serve the same functions. And I've said that in a lot of the teachings in the past, but just so we're clear, the Melchizedek, look, think of it as Moses is the one and Aaron is the other. It's very simple. They didn't do the same things. Guidance, instruction, and Torah was coming from Moses and the elders. The judging of things like, you had to go show yourself to the priest, and temple function was being done by the Levites. So in the millennium, that will still be the same thing, okay? You'll still have that going on. They'll still be separate, okay? Now, there was a time when there wasn't Levitical priests before we get to Moses and Aaron, and there's a time now where there aren't Levitical priests functioning, and a time after, the destruction of the temple. So we do have those time periods, but the Melchizedekian priesthood flows through it all, without beginning, without end. Okay? Good question, though. All right. Live stream.
Okay, from Andrea Berry. It says, I work with contract and contract law. Would you say that we are talking about an addendum to the original contract or covenant to the original?
Okay, that's probably not a bad way to look at it. Okay, I mean, I don't want to open up doors to those kind of things, and people might want to addend make addendums. But look, we're doing this all the time, okay? By necessity, we need to figure out how to deal with microwave ovens and even ovens on the Sabbath, because they didn't have ovens or microwaves on the Sabbath. By necessity, we got to figure out what to do with cars on the Sabbath, cell phones on the Sabbath. I mean, there's all kinds of things that the Bible didn't have by necessity. They didn't have those things. So now we've got to come up with halakhic decisions about, they didn't have like organ donations and blood transfusions and things going on in those times. What do you do with those things? Okay, so by necessity, there needs to be a body, this is Deuteronomy 17 stuff, that can come together and make decisions, because those things need to be addended to the law, because the law doesn't specifically give you instruction on these things that did not exist at that time. Okay? There are people that have said we're breaking the Sabbath because we live stream. Somehow that's doing work or doing something. I don't have any idea. People will think things or whatever it is, but the point is, this technology is not mentioned anywhere in your scripture. Okay? So yeah, we are always being, that's why we need a Sanhedrin. Okay? We need a body to do Deuteronomy 17 to say, this is policy for the 21st century. Okay? Based on scripture, because he says, and they will declare to you the right ruling of the Torah in a situation that Torah doesn't cover in that specificity that you would like. Okay? All right, next question.
Okay, from Chantel Jackson, chapter 8, verse 13. Is this still talking about the priesthood/temple?
Yes, he's specifically here talking about the temple and the priesthood. Now remember, the actual covenant itself, Israel had already broken. Okay, remember that's why they were set out to dispersion. They were not in the land without it being an occupied territory. I mean, they already broken these things. All right, but they're doing the best they can at this point to do things after they came back with Ezra and Nehemiah. They rebuilt the temple, etc. But here it's specifically saying that, look, this thing that's disappearing is the priesthood and the temple. Nothing else is disappearing.
From Harrison Bryce, would it be accurate to say that the Melchizedek priesthood is the priesthood that we are supposed to one day become kings and priests into, given
Correct.
that it isn't genealogical?
Correct.
And then Sharon Masters, I think, is pretty much the same thing. Is if our goal is to be kings and priests in the kingdom, will will we be of the order of Melchizedek?
Same thing, yes. The priests that are being referred to as being a kingdom of priests will be Melchizedekian priests, okay? Also, for those of you that are listening to the Melchizedekian teachings that are out there, which try to wipe out a bunch of the law and claim that the law was against us and all this other nonsense, recognize that now that you've heard what it actually does say in Hebrews, why that's a bunch of nonsense, okay? Because these priests that we're talking about as Melchizedekian priests are bringing you a more fully developed Torah understanding, not wiping or taking out any of it. They're the ones telling you that when it says not to commit adultery, that if you're lusting after, you're still breaking it. It's more fully developed. It's not taking anything out. We're not surgically removing anything. Even the temple is not being removed by any of the priests here. It's being removed by Rome. Rome's about to wipe that all out. Okay, go ahead.
From Michelle Perez, says, do you suggest newbies to study the covenants?
I suggest newbies to study everything, but don't do it all at once and choke to death on it. Starting, let's see, Covenant Community 101, I think we're up to like 100 and something parts of that now or something, I don't know. Marty, how many parts are there in the Covenant Community now? The Covenant Community 101, what's it got, 100 and something? About 125 parts, so start there. Actually, I would just start with even the Are You Covenanted teaching, that's fine. Actually, Fear of Yahweh is a great place to start, because you don't have that, you're not gonna have anything else. Matter of fact, all of the students in the MTOI Academy have been going through part 1 of that teaching this past week, or part 2 they might be up to, so they're going through the Fear of Yahweh teaching. So they're all learning from that, because I think that's where it starts. If you haven't figured out how to fear him, none of this other stuff is gonna work. Okay, next.
From Olivier and Janet Hoffman, says, Rabbi, chapter 7, verses 25 and 26, are we supposed to approach Yeshua as our high priest, since we are not to pray to him but Father? Also, would a contrite, repentant heart be the offering that we can bring other than tithes?
Yes, I mean, these are things that were talked about where he desires repentance, he desires those things more than slaughterings of animals. But also, look, the high priest had a role. You didn't go to the high priest to ask him to intervene for you. The high priest did this on a regular basis for everybody anyway, did it on the Day of Atonement for everybody. Yeshua is very clear that he says that you would pray in his authority to the Father, that you would ask the Father in his authority, but that we're not praying to him. Okay? Now, you can ask him to stand on your behalf for something, but he's automatically doing that anyway. That's his role. Okay?
Okay, from Adam, says, how did Abram know or / recognize the Melchizedek? Wouldn't Abram have had to somehow have heard of this high priest prior to this meeting?
Right, because I don't like to point to extra biblical books, but in the book of Yashar, the book of Jasher, Abraham was raised by his grandfather Noah, okay, or great, whatever it was. I don't want to get into how many, whatever it was, but Noah raised him quite a bit. And, while his father was very much busy, Nahor was busy, making idols for Nimrod and stuff, okay? Okay, but he already was being raised by Noah. Noah was Melchizedek at the time. And so by the time we get to Shem, who was Noah's son, Shem is, the book of Jasher says that when he sat down to eat with Melchizedek, it said it was Shem. So he would have had a relationship with Noah and his sons, or at least Noah and Shem for sure, so, okay?
From Kurt and Stephanie Meyer, how does the firstborn males replaced by the Levitical priesthood fit into the priesthood structure outlined in Hebrews? When it refers to the first / original covenant, are they part of it?
It doesn't say anything about that at this point. I think that what we're looking at is the anointed appointeds, like we saw before they went to the Levitical, all right? And the anointed appointeds were not often the firstborns. A lot of times they ended up being not the firstborns. We see that as we go through the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As we go down, we can see some of that playing through. But look for it by the fruit manifestation, okay? What is the person an anointed appointed? They would likely be the Melchizedekian. Are they speaking the word of Yahweh with authority? Are they getting insight that only can come from above? Are they clarifying for you and giving you the answers that, are they doing that role that Moses and the elders would have been doing? All right? So all you got to do is listen to the teachings that anybody's putting out there, and you'll know or you won't know. Okay? But of course, until you find one, you don't know what to compare it to. I mean, I'll use a really bad example. Okay, if you've never been to New York and had pizza, then you don't know when you compare your pizza where you live because you don't have the right measuring stick. No, but I'm serious. Think of it this way. If you are listening to a bunch of teachers that are all similar in level until you've actually heard an anointed, appointed one, you don't know the difference till you find one. Because they're all like the same. They're on similar levels. Okay? So, I mean, if you can't really tell the difference between like a Papa John's and a Domino's and a Little Caesars and what real pizza is, it's not your fault if you haven't had it. I've seen people's reaction when they've had what I'm talking about, okay? It's different. Okay, I can't explain it to you. So I'm not trying to be condescending or insulting. I'm just saying is your contextual basis for understanding is limited to what you've experienced. So if you don't have the experience, you wouldn't know. Okay, I'll give you a martial arts example. When I was studying for all the years in the forms that I know, one day a teacher walked in, I thought he was really cocky, and said, hey, when you want to see what it's really supposed to look like, you can come check out my school. And I had my own school at the time, and he walked into my school and acted like that. But he got my curiosity, so I went over to his place and watched him doing the same style I thought I knew, and then I realized I didn't know. Because now I saw it, I go, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. But I didn't know till I saw it. I had thought I had had the real deal. You don't know until you experience something that is the real deal, because you think you know, because you have a limited experience to measure against. Okay, so that's the kind of the point I'm trying to make. But then hopefully you have a discernment that when you do see it, you go, oh, yeah, that's it. And that's when I took my belt off, laid it at his feet, and said, okay, teach me from scratch. And he said, no, put that back on. I'll still teach you from scratch. But it was, okay? Now, it wasn't that it was completely different, but it was completely different, if you know what I'm saying. In other words, everything that they were doing, I knew. I just didn't know it in the fullness of the more fully developed and the higher level of mastery. So what I was doing was essentially, like an elementary or grade school level thing that was just not being done the right way. But you have to be open to look for that, okay? So if everybody you're listening to out there all sounds similar, you probably haven't found the person yet. Because when you find them, they will not sound like everybody else. They'll be on a whole different level, okay? And that's not being, cocky, because people say, well, you just think about it. Look, I'm not the one that says that about me. You guys are, okay? All right? But it's about you noticing that. If everybody's on the same level, then you're not finding that person because they're not all anointed. Okay, so if they all sound the same, you're still waiting to find somebody. All right? I think that's a fair assessment. If you disagree, that's fine, but maybe somebody else wants to agree or disagree. Okay? I don't even remember what the question was, but go ahead.
Okay, comment from Pete Lamb. Says, Rabbi Steve is the real pizza of Torah teachers.
You know that real pizza is real pizza and it's good is because it doesn't need pepperoni. All right, go ahead.
Okay, from the Starkle clan, it says, could Rabbi elaborate on chapter 7, 26, 27, verses 26 and 27 with regards to the slaughter and offerings?
No, all it's saying is that it's just trying to explain to you that the priests had to do certain things. Yeshua gave of himself once. Those priests always had to make an atonement for themselves before they could make an atonement for anybody else. So they had to offer up a slaughter offering because they knew that they were fleshly, imperfect people. And he's simply saying Yeshua did that once and for all. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't need to constantly have to make another offering of himself before he does anything for us. That's as simple as it gets. Okay, he did once for all, is what it says in verse 27. But see, unless you really understand the sacrificial system, you don't know how the priests, before they did what they did, they had to make one for themselves and then one for the people that they were doing it for. Because they had to make sure that they had been atoned for first.
From Nessa, so question, would it be fair to say the Melchizedek priesthood handles matters concerning the spirit of the law, and the Levitical priesthood handles the letter of the law?
No. Okay? All right? Let's make it more simple. The Levitical had only 2 roles: temple service, in other words, all the functionings of the temple, and some judging. Okay? In other words, there's certain things you had to go to the priest and have the priest make a judgment. The Melchizedekian was the instructors, the teachers. The 70 that had the anointing from Moses go on to them to go amongst the people teaching the Torah. Okay, so the Melchizedekian taught the letter and the spirit. The Levitical implemented the temple parts of it and made judgment about the things that is in there in that part of the law for them to judge. You had something on your skin, you had to go to a priest, not a Melchizedekian, to say, hey, is that something that's sarat or is not sarat? Okay? If it was on your clothes, if it was on the building of your house, there were things you had to, that's why Yeshua said to the lepers, go show yourself to the priest. Because the priest had to be the one to make that call. Okay? Okay, so the priesthood had a very limited authority. Judgment in certain things and running the temple. Okay? Everything else was being done by Melchizedekians. Who did they go to for issues of law? Deuteronomy 17. They really went to the Melchizedekians. They went to Moses and the elders. And when the issue was too hard and they would come up to the main head, the higher ones, like the heads of 10s, 50s, whatever, then they said, look, when they tell you what to do, you need to do it. They're not going to the priests alone. Now, the priests were involved when it was the few things the priests had to judge. There were things for the priests to judge. Okay? What's next?
That's all of them.
All right, awesome. All right, fantastic. How many did we end up with today? 684, awesome. Now, this is going to be important. You know I've said this many times. The teachings are designed to do 4 things, right? Understand it so you can do it, so you can defend it, so you can teach it. This stuff, starting in part 40, whatever, when I started talking about the book of Hebrews, you're going to need to listen to those until you can get to the part 3 of that, the 3rd step. You're going to have to be able to explain the really different way that you now understand what your Christian friends, whoever's going to argue with you, although you shouldn't argue with them anyway, but you know, when you're explaining things to even the Messianic friends, to understand that that's not what Hebrews is talking about, okay? You're going to need to listen to these things a few times to really get clarification. And recognize that this is not deep. It's actually more simple. It's just it was right in front of your face, but it was badly translated and not in context. Okay, this did not take advanced scholarship to understand. Okay? It's actually very simple. Okay, I'll give you an example. I had a guy the other day on the phone with me. I won't tell you who it is. Won't call anybody out. And he was asking something about hadn't listened to the parts yet about, Hebrews and that. And said, well, this whole thing on Melchizedek, it says he's without genealogy, without beginning, without end. So that means that he's Yeshua, right? Because, after all, it's a forever. He said, that would be the Peshat. I said, no, the Peshat is that it doesn't require genealogy. He goes, oh. See, sometimes it is more simple than you think even the simple is. The simplicity of the Peshat is that it's telling you don't need to have genealogy to be this. Okay? And look, I fell into the other one for years too. The church I had gone to for that brief period of time, they thought that Melchizedek was Yeshua. That's what they taught, because they couldn't understand Hebrews. And really, it's not Hebrew that they couldn't understand as far as the language. They couldn't understand Greek. Oh, it's all Greek to them anyway. Okay, anyway, so. Hi, Stephen.